Hey, it's Nick and it's Jay. This time on Lemon's World, we're gonna talk about arbitrary rules.
Where you going? Nobody hit it.
I stole the base. You weren't looking, so I stole it.
You said you could only advance after you hit the ball.
Not when you're stealing.
That's bullshit.
Racing as a whole is an arbitrary set of rules. It's not an objective test of the skill of man and the superiority of machine, as many race people will want you to believe. It's just a set of rules. You build your thing to the rules. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Maybe the most obvious illustration of that is Formula One. You'll be going along, there's a dominant team, then they decide, you know what, we're changing the rules. And then the next year, it's a completely different dominant team. Not because they're better, but because for whatever reason, they're better set up for the arbitrary set of rules.
Yeah, I think an even better example is, look, if this were just an objective test of speed, the Saturn V won in 1969. It went 25,000 miles an hour. In your crappy little Lemons car, are you going 25,000 miles an hour? You are not. This is a set of artificial rules, artificial restrictions. You got to solve the puzzle to meet those restrictions. And the most obvious restriction in most racing, including Lemons, is the classes. Totally made up. These cars fit there, those cars fit there, those cars fit there. You're racing against other people in their class. Totally artificial construct. But it matters because the whole thing is an artificial construct and you want to win. So classing in Lemons is much simpler than in most series. We just say like, well, those guys have a prayer of winning, they're in Class A. Those guys have a prayer of finishing, they're going to be in Class B. Those guys don't have a prayer of doing anything, they're in Class C. That's all it is.
But for some teams, granted maybe the minority in Lemons, it really does matter where they wind up in terms of the overall competition. And because of that, it matters to a certain extent what class they get put into.
So remember this morning when I said that if you had any black flags, I'd put you in Class B? Welcome to Class B.
No! Hey, come here! Come here, you son of a bitch! You rat bastard! You California hippie!
Team Virtual Reality 6. They had the misfortune of winning a Lemons race. They swear it was a total fluke, and because they're driving an Audi 90, I'm kind of inclined to agree. Well, the problem with winning a race is, even if your car is pretty terrible, it won a race, so it's likely to get put back in Class A for the foreseeable future. So now they're faced with the challenge of how do we make our existing car worse so that the Lemons judges are more likely to put it into a lower class?
Yeah, and considering that they were starting already with an Audi 90 that was abandoned at the dealership that they are all service techs at, well, it's going to be hard to make it worse. On the other hand, being an Audi, there are a lot of opportunities, starting with the engine. For example, if you were to take the front-to-back Audi motor and replace it with a formerly side-to-side Volkswagen motor, well, that might do the trick.
So they took the existing factory Audi V6, got rid of that, got themselves a 2.8-liter 12-valve VR6 from like a Jetta or something, and made it so that it would run longitudinally like it normally does in an Audi.
Which at first order would almost seem like an improvement, right? Because the VR6, very sophisticated engine. I mean, it's a V6, it only has one cylinder head.
And as they discovered, the quantity of cylinder heads was maybe not the best indicator of success in an endurance race.
That's right. Historically, the VR6 is in that real long line of creative engines. It's sort of the Miller Cycle Millennium motor of Volkswagen, where look great on paper, in practice, everybody knows, just terrible. Now, to be fair, if you don't rev it a lot, if you don't run it at wide open throttle, if you don't let it get too hot, you can nurse a VR6 to fairly high mileage. If you do any of those things, the entire world knows, kaboom.
Yeah, so they knew that we knew that this was a terrible idea, and sure enough, when they showed up, Judge Phil put this car right into Class B just as they had intended. Now, back to the engine for a second. This was a motor that they found, it was used, it ran, they could have just thrown it in as is, but then they saw on the shelf a new in-box set of ARP head studs for the VR6 motor, and these guys, they're racers. They know that ARP is way better than factory, so they put those in. What they didn't realize was that the ARP studs have a completely different torque spec from the shop manual that they were using there at the Audi dealer. They didn't tighten it up enough. It blew water out, it melted the cylinder head, overheated, and it was a total disaster.
So they thought they were going to be competitive. In fact, they just wound up being broken. They weren't going to give up, though. Now they're just moving on to the fun portion. So they found another head. They went out, they got it, they brought it back in, they put it on the car, they started it up. Water shot out both sides of the block, about 20 feet in both directions. They said, oh, that's not right. I think that was the Audi factory training talking. So they just torqued everything to about 10,000 foot-pounds, tried it, and it kind of worked.
So we asked these guys, at this point, what are the future plans and goals for this car? And their two answers were ice racing and impressing our moms.
Yeah, and I think this is just the perfect illustration of racing, not an objective test of speed.
VR6, no shit!